Now, let's cross to London now and catch up with the former Foreign Affairs Minister of this great country, Alexander Downer. Good to talk to you again, Alexander. You must be so distraught at what you're seeing and hearing is unfolding in Ukraine.
Yes, it's really horrific and for me so unexpected. I think I probably said on this program, I thought in the end President Putin would push it to the brink, but in the end wouldn't think it was worth invading Ukraine. Yet he's gone ahead and done it, despite the dire warnings from President Biden and some of the European leaders. So it seems to me reckless and extraordinary that he would do such a thing as this, and it's just deeply depressing.
Can the financial sanctions and economic sanctions that have been outlined already, and presumably they'll be ratcheted up if possible, there'll be close examination of those, can they do enough damage to Putin and his cronies and to the Russian financial system to force a rethink, do you think?
No, I don't think, well, I mean, it's unpredictable, isn't he? But from what he's done so far, I don't think President Putin is being guided by rational thinking. It wasn't rational to invade Ukraine. I mean, he'll never be able to occupy Ukraine in the long term. He'll only be able to achieve a short-term and rather bloody military victory through the sheer weight and technology of his military. But on the other hand, he is going to have to, and the Russian people are going to have to bear the very substantial burden of these sanctions. I think the sanctions should be absolutely ruthless. They should be the strongest imaginable sanctions. And those sanctions, I don't think will change his mind now. No, I mean, we just have to demonstrate that there is, the West, which he obviously has judged to be weak. We need to demonstrate to him, but also to China and to the rest of the world, the absolute resolution and strength of the West and the unity of the West. And we have to try to recapture that through the sanctions regime that's imposed.
Now, it was interesting to hear you say that he cannot occupy Ukraine long term. Explain to us why is that the case? Are you convinced that the Ukrainian people would mount effectively an endless resistance?
Well, I think they would, yeah. I mean, you can see that from the vox pops of so many people. I mean, I've just been talking to someone who's fleeing, but the vox pops of so many people who are absolutely resolved to stick there and to fight. I mean, there will be all sorts of ugly incidents, bombs going off, assassinations and so on after the Russians completely take over the country, assuming that they do. They certainly can completely take over the country and defeat the Ukrainian military. But we know from past experience, and surely the Russians do from their time in Afghanistan, you cannot control a country that you have invaded in the long term. In the short term, yes, but in the long term, it's impossible to do.
Of course, part of Putin's rationale is he didn't want Ukraine turning to Europe. He didn't want Ukraine to think it might actually join NATO. Certainly after this, if Ukraine ever gains control of all of its lands again, that's exactly what it will want to do, won't it? To seek the protection of NATO.
Yeah. Well, exactly. I mean, of course it will. To put it mildly, President Putin has turned most of the people of Ukraine very bitterly against him. Not all of them, of course, as we know, but most of them will be very bitter about what he's done. And as with the Baltic republics and the former communist countries of Eastern Europe, they will want the guarantees in the future of being part of NATO. But Ukraine is symbolically very important to Russia. Russia is paranoid about its western borders, the countries on its west, so they will hang on to Ukraine and stop Ukraine joining NATO for as long as they can. But I mean, you're right, it won't be indefinite, but it could be for a long time.
Well, let's just have a look at a little bit of what the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has said today.
He will never be able to cleanse the blood of Ukraine from his hands. Now we see him for what he is, a blood-stained aggressor who believes in imperial conquest.
Well, that's it. Boris Johnson there talking about Vladimir Putin. Now, I was working with you at the Munich security conference back in 2007 when Vladimir Putin made that famous speech where he railed against the international order and talked about reclaiming Russia's place in the world. You know, people thought he was unhinged at the time, yet this is what has played out over the decade and a half since. Is that what the world needs to do here? Is just outweight Vladimir Putin? It's not really a Russian thing here. It's this dictatorial leader and his crazy plans.
Yes, but I think I've explained before. It is more than that. It's about the Russian psyche and the history of Russia and the impact on Russians of the invasions historically from the West and the lack of natural frontiers that Russia has between it and the West. So that is something that's very deeply embedded in the Russian psyche and the Russian zeitgeist. But yes, I mean, I was not only reflecting on this Munich conference that we were both at and where President Putin made his fiery speech, but I remember sitting next to President Putin just before he made his speech at that Munich security conference. And I thought at the time that it did reflect a Russian mindset, but it also reminded us of how paranoid Russia has been about what has happened to it since the fall of communism and the collapse of the Soviet Union. Indeed.
Thanks so much for joining us, Alexander. Appreciate your time.
It's a pleasure.
Alexander Downer there getting up very early for us in London. It's great that he does that.